The desert was quiet in the way a graveyard is quiet, never peaceful, only waiting. Wind dragged itself across the cracked earth, curling dust around dead bushes and broken fence posts. The sun was sinking low, bleeding red into the horizon like a warning God forgot to erase. At the edge of this forgotten land stood a small wooden cottage, crooked and stubborn, just like the man who lived inside it. Ezekiel Boone. He was a rancher, a cowboy, a man carved from grief and prayer. His shoulders were broad, his hands scarred from rope burns and horse reins. But what everyone noticed first, what everyone whispered about, was his beard. Long, thick, untouched. It was not style. It was obedience. They said Ezekiel hadn't shaved since the night his father died. That night still lived inside the walls of the cottage. The night of the curse. Ezekiel had been 16 when he woke to screaming. His mother's voice cracked through the darkness, sharp with terror. Ezekiel ran barefoot across the wooden floor, heart-hammering, and burst into the small bedroom. His father, Jonah Boone, lay on the bed, face pale, throat slashed with blood from a shaving razor still clutched in his hand. But it wasn't suicide. No. Jonah's eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, mouth moving as if still trying to speak. Blood soaked his collar, dripping onto the floor like spilled wine. Ezekiel dropped to his knees. "Pa?" Jonah's fingers twitched. His lips trembled. And then Jonah Boone whispered the words that would curse a town for generations. "If you shave, God will kill you." Then his eyes went empty. No sickness, no struggle, no explanation. By sunrise, Jonah Boone was buried. By sunset, the legend was born. The man who never shaved? Years passed. Ezekiel grew into the ranch, into the silence, into the curse. He never shaved, not once. Not for heat. Not for comfort. Not even when his face itched and bled beneath the sun. The townsfolk watched him like he was walking proof of God's wrath. Some feared him. Some mocked him. Some prayed he'd never break. Because everyone believed the same thing. If Ezekiel Boone ever shaved, God would strike him dead. The woman who didn't know. The evening she arrived, the desert tried to kill her. Ezekiel spotted her just before sunset, something dark against the pale sand near the broken fence line. At first, he thought it was a dead animal. Then it moved. He swung himself onto his horse and rode closer, dust kicking up beneath the hooves. As he approached, he saw her clearly. A woman collapsed in the sand. Dress torn, lips cracked, eyes barely open. Her horse lay nearby, exhausted but alive. Ezekiel dismounted quickly. "Miss?" No answer. He knelt, touched her shoulder. She flinched weakly. She was burning with fever. Without thinking, Ezekiel lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light. Like the desert had already started stealing her away. He carried her back to the cottage. The cottage. The cottage smelled of wood smoke, leather, and old. Prayers. Ezekiel laid her near the fireplace, poured water between her lips, wrapped her in blankets. She coughed, shivered, then finally slept. Hours passed. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Ezekiel watched her breathe. He hadn't shared this space with anyone in years, not since his mother died. When the woman finally woke, her eyes locked onto him and froze. She stared at his beard like she'd seen a ghost. "You look like—" Her voice was weak. "Like death." Ezekiel didn't smile. "Most folks say worse." She swallowed. "Where am I?" "My ranch." She struggled to sit up. He helped her gently. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she said. "I was heading west. I didn't think the desert would—" "Desert always thinks," Ezekiel said quietly. "It waits." She studied him again, curiosity overtaking fear. "And you?" she asked. "Ezekiel Boone." Her eyes widened slightly. She didn't know why yet. Days of silence. Clara stayed. At first because she had no choice. Then because she didn't want to leave. Days passed slowly, wrapped in heat and quiet. Ezekiel fed the horses at dawn. Clara swept the cottage, cooked when she felt strong enough. They spoke little. But silence can grow heavy or intimate. At night, they sat near the fire. One evening, Clara finally asked, "Why does everyone stare at you in town?" Ezekiel didn't answer. She leaned closer. "Why do they look at your face like that?" He stared into the flames. "Because they think God's watching me." She laughed softly. "God watches everyone. Ezekiel turned to her then, eyes dark. They think he's waiting for me to make a mistake. The preacher's warning. Word spread quickly. A woman was staying with Ezekiel Boone. The preacher came riding at noon. Reverend Cole dismounted, Bible in hand, eyes sharp with judgment. You're tempting fate, he told Ezekiel. A woman brings weakness. Clara stood in the doorway, listening. God tests his chosen, the preacher continued. Don't let desire undo what obedience built. Ezekiel said nothing, but Clara felt the warning sink into her bones. That night, unable to sleep, she looked at Ezekiel sitting by the fire. His beard glowed in the firelight, and without knowing the weight of her words, without knowing the blood behind them, she whispered, Why don't you shave? The fire cracked loudly. Ezekiel stood so fast his chair fell backward. Never, he said, voice shaking. Say that again. Clara recoiled, fear flooding her face. I didn't. You don't know, he whispered. You don't know what it costs. Outside, the wind screamed like something angry had heard her. That night, sleep refused to come. The wind battered the cottage walls like a warning knock that never stopped. Clara lay awake on the narrow bed, Ezekiel's sharp words still ringing in her ears. Never say that again. She hadn't meant harm. She hadn't known. But fear now pressed against her chest like a stone. Near the fireplace, Ezekiel sat with his elbows on his knees, staring into the dying embers. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from memory. Finally, Clara spoke. Ezekiel, I'm sorry. He didn't look at her. I didn't mean to anger you, she continued softly. I just don't understand. Silence stretched between them, thick and painful. Then Ezekiel stood. If I tell you, he said, voice low, you may never look at me the same. I already don't, Clara replied. I look at you like a man carrying something too heavy to lift alone. That made him turn. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. The story no one told her. My father was a good man, Ezekiel began. Hard, God-fearing, never broke a rule. He walked to the small mirror hanging crooked on the wall, the same mirror that would one day matter more than his life. One night, he continued, a woman laughed at him in town, said he looked wild. Said no God would punish a clean face. Clara swallowed. He shaved that night, Ezekiel said. Just once. His jaw tightened. He never saw the morning. Clara's breath caught. They said God struck him, Ezekiel went on. Said it was punishment for vanity, for disobedience. He touched his beard slowly like a man touching a wound. So I swore, he whispered. Never again. Not for heat. Not for love. Not for anything. Clara felt cold spread through her veins. That's why they fear you? She asked. They fear what would happen if I stop obeying, Ezekiel replied. They fear God's anger would fall on all of them. The town's eyes. The next day, Clara felt it. Every step through town brought whispers. Women turned away. Men stared openly. Children pointed. There's the woman, someone murmured. The one tempting him. At the general store, a man spat near her feet. You best leave, he growled. Before you bring God's wrath on us all. Clara returned to the ranch shaken. That evening, Ezekiel found her crying behind the cottage. I don't belong here, she said. They hate me. They fear you, Ezekiel corrected. Because you make me human again. He hesitated, then gently took her hand. It was the first time they touched. Something warm bloomed in the cold desert air. Love against a curse. Days passed. The town grew colder. The ranch grew warmer. They shared meals, stories, quiet laughter. One night, Clara leaned her head against Ezekiel's shoulder. Does God really want you to live alone? She asked. Ezekiel didn't answer. He didn't know. He only knew that when Clara smiled, the curse felt weaker. But curses don't disappear. They wait. Men from the south. Trouble rode in at dusk. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Their horses were lean. Their eyes were cruel. Ezekiel watched from the porch, hand resting near his revolver. Clara felt dread crawl up her spine. The leader dismounted with a grin carved from violence. Marcus Kane. Well, I'll be damned, Kane said. The bearded ghost still lives. His eyes slid to Clara. And he's got himself something pretty. Ezekiel stepped forward. She's not for sale. Cain laughed. No, he said. She's for taking. The desert wind fell silent, and somewhere deep inside Ezekiel Boone, something old and dangerous, began to wake. If you love intense Cowboy, stories filled with forbidden love, dark secrets, faith, revenge, and shocking twists, then subscribe to this channel right now. Every story here pulls you deep into the desert, where one decision can change a life, a town, and destiny itself. Turn on the bell so you never miss a story that will keep you watching until the very last second.